Hey guys, we're here for day 2 of Alabama Moon. We're going to be reading chapters 3 and 4. I do want you to continue to think about how you would feel if you were Moon, the main character. Moon is around 10 years old, so that's around your age. So think about what you would be feeling. That means to empathize, to feel what he feels. Also, before we get started, this book is called Alabama Moon. This book is set in Alabama. Alabama's nature, Alabama's land is somewhat similar to ours. Their weather's similar. Their woods are similar, like where he's living. There's a lot of pine trees. That's very similar to the area around here. So when you're picturing this setting and the weather and what he's seeing around him, try to picture the woods around where we live. That'll give you a sense of how it feels and what it looks like. All right, let's get busy. Chapter 3. Winter had been on us for 2 months, and the forest creatures were fat and fluffy in their new coats. It had started to snow once, but the ground didn't hold it, which always disappointed me. I only remembered a few times when there was enough snow to make tracks in. One of those times, Pap and I made pine bark sleds and had races down the riverbank. I'd always wanted to do it again. On the morning Pap broke his leg, the north wind was tossing the tops of the trees and gray clouds raced over our heads. Pap was always alert when the wind stirred the forest floor and cartwheeled the leaves. It was hard to tell which sounds were natural and which weren't. We were checking traps along a beaver dam only a mile from the lodge. With the wind blowing like it was and us being so close to Mr. Wellington's place, Pat must have been extra nervous. I think he was too busy looking around for signs of people to pay attention to where he was going. He slipped on the dam and got his shin caught between 2 branches. He had just enough time to turn and look at me before he fell into the beaver pond on his back. And I'm going to stop right there. A beaver dam, I think you guys know what a beaver dam is. It's where they take a lot of sticks and logs and they try to stop the water from flowing. So you can walk across that. It's almost like logs and sticks you can walk across, but it's not a straight log. There's a lot of little pieces. Pap slipped on it. And it says that he got his shin, S-H-I-N, shin caught. Now, your shin, excuse my white legs, your shin is this part of your leg. You guys have probably hit that part, and it hurts when you hit that part because there's not a lot of meat there. It's like you can touch that bone. This is where Pap fell and hit his leg. This is what stuck, okay? The water was so clear, I saw his face staring up at me and wincing in pain, wincing. I jumped down after him and jerked at the branches until his leg came loose. The rest of Pap splashed into the water, and then he dragged himself out of the pond. After he was propped up against a cypress knee, I went and found some sticks to use for a splint, and we bound his leg with leather shoelaces from my moccasins. Think about when you or someone you know has broken a leg or a bone. You usually go and get a cast. They're not going to the hospital. They're going to do it themselves. So they got those sticks to hold it in place. And then what did they use to hold those sticks on? He said they used shoelaces to hold it on. That afternoon, I got Pat back up to the shelter in the wheelbarrow. He pulled himself inside, and I saw how much his leg hurt by the sweat that soaked his face and clothes. I helped him up on the hide pile and stayed next to him to give him water as he needed it. Pap didn't like doctors, and he didn't like medicine that you couldn't find in the forest, so there wasn't much else for me to do. Sometime that night, Pap told me to take his boot off. I watched his hands white-knuckle the roots. Watch my hands. See how my knuckles turn white? That's when you grip real tight. White knuckle. I watched his hands white-knuckle the roots above his head while I pulled slowly on the heel. He didn't make any noise because it was nighttime. When I got the boot off, bloody water and sand poured out of it. I cut the sock away with my knife and placed it to the side. We saved everything. Even a bloody sock could make a rag to patch clothes. In the dim light of the grease lamp, I saw parts of Pap's bone coming through his shin. Seeing bone and blood and wounds was nothing to me. I dealt with them almost every day, killing, skinning, and butchering animals. I only hesitated so that Pap would tell me what to do. "Get a rag and wipe it off," he said. "Boil some water and put the rag in the water before you do." "So the wound won't get infected?" "That's right." I went to the wood stove and did as he said. When I returned and began gently to wipe his leg, I watched his face. I saw his expression change when the rag went over the jagged portion of the bone. "Does it hurt?" "Just keep wiping." "You want me to go get it, Mr. Abrascato?" "There's nothing he can do that you can't do yourself, boy." I nodded and kept wiping. I stayed up with him that night after the wound was clean. After a while, Pap didn't seem to be concerned that we stay quiet anymore. He laid there and talked to me and told me most of what he was thinking. "Tell me again why we live out here," he asked me. "Because we never asked for anything and nobody ever gave us anything. Because of that, we don't owe anything to anybody." "Who is it that thinks we owe them something?" "The government." "That's right." After a moment, "And what's going to happen to everybody that relies on the government?" "When the war comes, they're not going to be able to take care of themselves," I said. "They'll have forgotten how to grow food and trap game, how to make their own clothes and shelter," he said. "How to find their own medicine in the forest," I said. "Yep, that's right." "How to shoot rifles." "That's right," Pap said. "All of those things." "And I know how to do it all." He nodded. I stood, walked over to the stove, and put some more wood into it. Even when Pap let us burn it all night, the heat was rarely enough to keep our breath from streaming in front of our faces. I returned to the hide pile. "I'm not going to get any better," he said. Listen to that again. "I'm not going to get any better," he said. "What?" "I'm not going to get better." "You're going to die?" He nodded. I felt my stomach twist. "Tonight?" "No, but soon. Something like this leg won't heal." "How soon?" "I don't know." "But I don't understand." "Think about it. Think about a deer that breaks its leg. What happens?" "But you're not a deer," I yelled. "There's no difference. We're all animals." I felt like I would get sick on the floor. "What will I do?" "Well, that's what I'm going to tell you." Pap said that it might be not long before Mr. Wellington ran me off the property. I would have to find someone else to live with. Pap said there were many other people like us all over the country. He said there were more now than ever. Most of them were out west in Montana, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. Alaska was even better. A man could still homestead in Alaska. He could get to places where no one could find him. People could still make a living off trapping up there. Hides were worth something in Alaska. I'd have to find my way there. "But how?" "Well, you'll figure it out. You can't rely on me anymore. Just remember the things I taught you. Take cover during the day and move at night. Use the stars. Don't trust anybody. Make me smoke letters if you get lonely." "Do you talk to Mama with smoke letters?" "Sometimes I do," he said. "Does she say anything back?" "She does, but not in the way you'd think." "How will I get answers from the smoke?" Pap didn't say anything for a few seconds. "You just do what I tell you," he finally said. For the first couple of days, I tried to keep our regular routine each morning while Pap was sick. I rose before daylight and checked the traps. I brought back what I caught. I skinned it, butchered it, and prepped the hide. I hauled water from the creek and cut needles for tea. In late afternoon, I did my reading lessons. But it was hard to keep my mind on these things with Pap lying in the shelter getting worse. Suddenly, it seemed like there wasn't a reason for doing anything. Mr. Abrascato hadn't brought our hides in years. I'm sorry, let me read that again. Hang on, guys, my dog is driving me crazy. Come here, Butch. Come here. Come on. Okay, come sit down. I'm going to start over on that paragraph. But it was hard to keep my mind on these things with Pap lying in the shelter getting worse. Suddenly, it seemed like there wasn't a reason for doing anything. Mr. Abrascato hadn't bought our hides in years. We had plenty of water stored up already, and if Pap was going to die soon, why'd we need any more? And how would I find a place like Alaska on my own? Y'all think about how far Alaska is from Alabama. It is a long way. I couldn't clean Pap's wound without him twisting about in pain. Finally, he told me to stop worrying over it and leave it alone. It won't do it any good, he said. It's too far gone to trouble over. It's not too much trouble, Pap. I don't mind. Leave it be. Put that rag away. Well, what if we cut it off? It's too late. The infection's up my whole leg. I started crying. I can't live by myself, Pap. He shook his head. Shut up, boy. You don't cry, you hear me? I wiped my eyes and nodded at the floor. I put my arms around his neck. I can't do it, Pap. I can't make it to Alaska. I can't fight the government. I like it here. I don't see why I can't get Mr. Abrascato to come help you. He'll just get the law down on you. I can run from the law. I can get away. Pap didn't answer me. He was quiet for a long time. You'll be all right, he finally said. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Chapter 4. I wrote Pap a letter that first night after I buried him. Dear Pap, I'm going to see Mr. Abrascato in the morning and ask him if he knows anything about getting to Alaska. Seeing as how I'll be leaving soon, I'll pull up the traps tomorrow morning and pack them in the boxes. I'm going to take your watch and sell it to Mr. Abrascato. I thought about keeping it for myself, but I don't need it, and you were never much on things a person didn't need. I'm scared, Pap, but I know I can lick most anything 3 times my size. I know I can survive on my own and keep away from the government. I'm lonely, too, but you said that'll go away after a while. It doesn't seem like a feeling that goes away easy. But you always knew about things, so I'm not worried. Love, Moon. I buried the letter in the wood stove and then walked to the back corner of the shelter where Pap kept his personal storage. It was a metal ammunition box containing his watch and a few other things he called his valuables. We had that word. He called his valuables and never let me see it. The first time he brought out the box was when Mama died. He showed me the watch and said she gave it to him when they were married. It had Mr. and Mrs. Oliver Blake, 1968, etched into the back. On my 8th birthday, I asked about the watch again. I think it made him remember Mama, and he let me study it. He told me that one day it would be mine. When I got the box out that night, I realized that Pap hadn't told me where the key was that opened it. I didn't want to bust it in case I damaged the watch and anything else in there that I might be able to sell. I searched under Pap's bed and up the roots of the ceiling. I felt around the hole that led to the stage 2 area. After a while, I gave up and I sat with the box between my legs on the hide pile. The fire in the stove went out and I didn't feel like starting it again. The shelter grew cold and damp and dark. I thought I'd have nightmares if I slept, so I tried to stay awake and imagine what it would be like in Alaska. But I got so lonely that I decided nightmares were worth it. I closed my eyes and slept. The next morning, I woke before daylight and went to pick up the traps and release or throw away anything that was caught in them. There were 2 dead coons with stiff, matted hides. I pulled them from the steel jaws and tossed them into the brush because the meat was spoiled. When I returned, I packed the traps in the 2 wood boxes we used to store them and stacked them beside the shelter. After watching Pap die, I found that his finally being gone had made things easier on me. I still felt a deep, lonely hole, but as much as I missed him, I could now concentrate on what he'd told me to do and get started to Alaska. Now, that's it for today's reading, chapter 3 and 4, but I want you to think about something real quick. I want you to think about how far it is to Alaska. Guys, Alaska is not in like the United States with all the states together. You have to go through Canada to get to Alaska. Alaska is far away. Can Moon drive? Can Moon get a plane ticket? How is Moon going to get there? That's what his goal is. Why? Why is that his goal? Because that's all he knows. Because that's what Pap said. Think about Moon's plans. Moon says that he's going where? He's going to Mr. Abrascado's. And he's going to tell Mr. Abrascado what his plans are. And then he's hoping Mr. Abrascado will help him by giving him money so that he can get to Alaska. Quit, Butch. So, do you think that Moon's plan is reasonable? Do you think that Moon can do it on his own? Do you think you could? Does he have anybody? So think about that. Put yourself in his shoes. Remember that word, empathize with Moon and see what comes. Predict. That's what good 4th grade brains can do, is predict. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.